All right, everybody, we are going to go over chapter 7 and 19, nutrition, and then clients with metabolic concerns. This video will likely be 3 parts. So we'll get the first part started right here. Quick reminder of our scope of practice. Before we get into the scope of practice, let's do a little overview of this lecture. We will get into dietary assessment, energy and nutrient requirements. We'll go over basic nutrients, weight gain, weight loss, supplements, recommendations, overweight, obesity, exercise prescription, abdominal fat. That will likely be the first video. And then the next couple videos will go over lifestyle support, exercise concerns, prescription, clients with metabolic concerns such as hyperlipidemia, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and then aerobic resistance and flexibility conditioning, and then eating disorders. Our scope of practice, we are here to address nutritional misinformation and to give general advice related to nutrition for physical performance, disease prevention, weight loss, and weight gain. So the key word of these 2 chapters is general. We're giving general advice. We always refer to a registered dietitian or an RD for comprehensive dietary assessments. That's also comprehensive dietary meal plans and things like that. After this chapter, we will be able to recognize disease states that can be affected by nutrition. And we will learn when it is appropriate to refer a client to a registered dietitian for medical nutrition therapy or help in general. The key responsibilities of us as a personal trainer are as follows. We serve as a source of credible nutrition information. We again address misinformation. We recognize that there's complex nutrition issues and we refer accordingly. And this will come up a lot in this chapter is when in doubt, we refer out, but we know that even when we're not in doubt, we don't give out meal plans. We always refer out if our client is asking for a meal plan. That's going to come up a lot. You'll see registered dietitian come up a lot in this chapter. And then we want to create and maintain a referral list. And that might take some time, getting to know different types of colleagues. But once you build a network, you will have maybe a few colleagues that are dietitians, and cross referral is really helpful. So once you start referring to them, maybe they have someone who's looking for a trainer and can refer back to you. So some things we can do as a trainer is, remember, general is a keyword, dietary analysis. What would that look like though? How would I ask my client to analyze their diet? Well, there's a couple of different methods. There's a 24-hour diet recall. We're asking the client what they ate in the last day for the quick snapshot of their intake. What did you eat the last 24 hours? There's also dietary history, so asking about their usual eating habits, likes, dislikes, medical history, kind of getting to know what's the vibe. And I think one of the most common ones, very easy, very accessible to do, is a 3-day, 24-hour diet record. So have the client log everything they eat for 3 days in the entire 24 hours. We suggest, hey, to the client, hey, can you do 2 weekdays and record 1 weekend day? And the reason why is we typically eat a little bit differently on the weekend. Sometimes maybe we have something extra, maybe it's more limited. It's just could be different. So we like to have that little snapshot of 1 weekend day. We also want to encourage our clients, hey, when you're doing this, track creamer in your coffee, track everything you add to your food, things that maybe they don't think of, give them some examples and suggestions. So what would we do if we had that 3-day diet record, right? How do I know what suggestions to make? What do I do with this information? Well, let's keep going. When we want to when we want to help our client with nutrition and we want to evaluate their diet, here's some general guidelines. We will compare the client's diet to general recommendations like My Plate. Again, that word general is coming up, right? So this is not specific. This is not nutrition therapy. This is very general guidelines. We're just trying to get them in that general guideline. One thing we could look at is My Plate. So My Plate is a guide from the government, basically U.S. Department of Agriculture. We'll get into it a little bit later. And we can compare the client's 3-day recall to my plate. See if they're eating a balanced diet, looking for patterns in caloric intake, food choices, and nutrient timing. Are they eating a lot at a certain time of day? Are their meals sparse, spread out throughout the day? We also want to look at any trends. So, kind of like we were just mentioning, pointing out foods that could possibly be increased or decreased based off their goals, and the USDA general guidelines. We also want to know limits. Remember, this is a general assessment. For detailed analysis or medical advice, we will always refer our client and tell our client, hey, there's registered dietitians that can help you with that. And we work together. A little bit more about USDA MyPlate. Again, that's US Department of Agriculture. This has recently been updated as well, so please check it out when you can. We'll click this link in a bit so you can see their website and the guide that they offer. But in general, MyPlate has always been a tool. It used to be a food pyramid. So MyPlate has always been a tool that provides recommendations for healthy eating lifestyle, divides food into 5 main groups, each providing key nutrients like carbs, fats, protein, water, vitamins, and minerals. So the basic 5 food groups from USDA MyPlate are fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. And then the daily intake recommendations. This is also, oh, we'll get into that a little bit later, but here are some general daily guidelines to follow from USDA MyPlate. Grains, 3 to 8 ounces per day, protein, 2 to 6.5 ounces a day, fruit and vegetables, 1 to 3 cups of each, dairy, 3 cups, oils, about 6 teaspoons. However, if you look at MyPlate, this link will show you a new guide. This is something you give to your client as a guide. We'll click on it right here. There is a new edition for 2025. As you can see, this looks like a pyramid, but they go more with a plate structure. A big thing that they updated is prioritizing protein at every single meal. And look at this protein suggestion. 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day. High protein suggestion, which is great. We'll get into our protein recommendations in a little bit. Just remember 1.2 to 1.6 is here on the USDA. And let's see if we can see their carbohydrate recommendation. They're letting people know limit alcohol beverages. And I'm looking for anything else that sticks out, but definitely check this out. And back to our slide. So here we are. Another version of My Plate. This was from 1 or 2 years ago. So as you see, things have been, now they have that guide, and the plate was not on that guide, but they still have this around. Let me see if we can actually pull it up on their website. So let's see, they have a daily servings guide. That's what we're going to look at. Okay, it's not the plate. Please peruse this website. Lots of cool suggestions. This image basically mimics the recommendations right here on this bottom. Grains, protein, fruits, veggies, dairy, oils. How could it look on a plate? That's an example. Reminder that all food and beverage choices matter. We want to eat the appropriate number of calories. We'll get into how can we figure out what that number is. And we want to encourage our clients to choose an eating style low in saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, and to follow the portion suggestions from the MyPlate. We will actually get into macros in a couple slides, and we'll be able to give our client suggestions for protein, carbohydrate, and fat intake based off their caloric intake per day and their body weight. So talking a little bit about energy requirements. So we're getting into calories. We took the 3-day food recall from our client, but I don't know how much calories they should actually be eating per day. So how will I figure that out? Let's get into it. Energy is measured in kilocalories or kcals, commonly called calories. Our total energy needs are determined by 3 factors. So essentially, how much calories I need to stay alive each day is based off of 3 things. The first thing is resting metabolic rate, or RMR. That's just what I need to stay alive. breathing, thinking, living. That's going to take 60 to 75% of my daily calories. That's a lot. On top of that, the second thing, or under that, the second thing that's going to take a big amount of calories is physical activity. So anything I do on top of homeostasis or just me chilling, living my life, any physical activity I add on top of that, that's going to burn the second largest amount of calories. And then the final one is going to be thermal effective food. It's going to take the smallest amount of calories, 7 to 10% of my total energy per day. And the thermic effective food is the energy I need to digest my food. So everything that's involved in digestion, it's going to take some calories. And then this is a bonus piece of information we'll get into a little bit, but you might hear RER if you're looking into the, if you're looking into fuel and how our body uses fuel. And we just want to introduce what RER is. It's not, it's a separate concept entirely, but respiratory exchange ratio, just so you know, it's it measures what our body is using, either fats or carbs, by analyzing gas exchange. So not how many calories we're burning. Definitely look into it a little bit later. It's a cool concept and definitely requires some equipment to be able to test that. But if you hear RER, it's not going to be part of our energy requirements, but it is something that deals with measuring what fuel our body is using when we're working out. Introducing two different concepts that will get us to a similar goal, which is how many calories do I need per day? Well, we can go two routes. We can use our basal metabolic rate or our resting metabolic rate. Resting metabolic rate is going to be a little more common for us trainers and coaches to use because it's very easy estimation for us. Basal metabolic rate, a little more stricter. It requires stricter conditions for us to get that end number or result. So let's go over each. Basal metabolic rate or BMR is going to be, it requires an individual to fast for 12 hours, get full rest, and maybe even a specific temperature of the environment. What is basal metabolic rate? Well, it's a minimum number of calories needed for basic life functions. When we look at resting metabolic rate or RMR, it's less strict. What the information that we need to get our RMR is recent food intake and light activity. So no one needs to fast. It's a little bit more chill. Then RMR is an estimate of calories burned at rest in a normal daily state. So BMR is the minimum, RMR is an estimate. The value of BMR is slightly lower, and the value of RMR is slightly higher. We'll talk about what that means. And when we're talking about basal metabolic rate, that's commonly used in clinical settings, research, and when we use resting metabolic rate, remember it's an estimate. We just use that more commonly for general health and fitness planning. So if you have access to either, I think it's great to have both numbers, but RMR is a great estimate of calories burned at rest. It's a great place to start getting our caloric needs or that number. And then at the bottom, it says when the table says that the BMR value is slightly lower, it means that the calorie count for BMR is a smaller number than the calorie count for RMR. Because remember, BMR is stricter measurement of energy. RMR is a little more estimation. So sometimes the calories that you're going to get from the RMR is going to be a little higher. And then when we're talking about the calories that we're getting is how many calories per day should I be eating? To figure that out, we either use BMR, RMR, and some equations. Moving on, we're still talking about energy requirements. How much calories do I need to live per day? It can be difficult to obtain directly, but there's a couple estimations, there's a couple alternative methods. So two different equations that are pretty fun is one, estimate by body weight and activity level. Notice there's no age, there's no height, there's not a whole lot in there. So that's going to be table 7.2. And say you have your client's weight and activity level, we can put that into this mathematical equation right here based off on the left side, the left column, activity level, categorize your client per age. So say that we had a 21-year-old male. We have, oh, there's no age. We have just weight and body weight. So say that we have a 200-pound male and they're moderately active. What we would do is 200 divided by 2.2 to get their kilograms. 200 divided by 2.2 is 90.9. So let's just say 91. They're moderately active. So I'll probably use this first. Actually, let me use the second column since I converted it to kilograms. We'll do 91 times 41 calories per kilogram. And he will be at 3731 calories per day, which seems high, but remember it's estimate and it's actually sounds good. Now let's use that same male. He didn't have an age yet because that didn't require age, but he's 200 pounds or 91 kilos. And let's look at the second mathematical equation or estimate. The second one is we're calculating RMR or resting energy expenditure and multiplying by a factor based off activity level. So let's look into this one. That's right here. I'll go back to the other side. So let's give our male an age. Let's make him 23, still weighing 200 pounds. So that means under this first green box, age and sex, we have a male who's 21. That's going to be the second call, this technically like fourth row, but the second row, males 19 to 30 years. And let's do this equation for our male. Remember PEMDAS, so we want to do everything in parentheses first. So PEMDAS is like that math acronym, right? Remember, he's 91 kilos. Just as a reminder, the last calorie estimate we got was 3731. So 3,731. Let's see what we get from here. 91 kilos times 15, times 15.057 plus 692.2 is 2,062 calories. Now, that's a big difference from that 3,000 number, right? Well, we didn't forget, but we have to do that second part. So we have to then multiply the activity factor. So he's moderately active. That's going to be under level of activity, this second row right here, active or moderately active lifestyle. Let's times that by, let's go 1.8 because it says 1.7 to 1.9. And that's going to give us 3,712. So 3,000 calories, 712. Very, very, very close. If not the same, I forgot the other number. But going back to this slide this is just explaining what we literally just did is estimate by resting energy expenditure and activity level. Reminder that basal metabolic rate is the absolute minimum energy our body needs to complete rest. RMR and REE, kind of identical, but they're slightly less strict. And then making them about 10% higher calories, usually the BMR. Awesome. And so what we just did was found our total daily energy expenditure for our male client who was 21, 91 kilos. So there's a couple math equations that we'll have to do. However, it's not too complicated. For the main thing we need is weight and activity level. And then if we want to do another equation for another calorie amount, let's get that age. And those are all things you will have in your first fitness assessment for sure. A little bit more about energy availability. We're going to talk about a condition. So energy availability is, are we eating enough to fuel both our workouts and our essential functions? When there's not enough energy to do both, an individual can enter a state of low energy availability, which can lead to a condition called relative energy deficiency in sport. To cope with this energy shortage, the body will enter adaptive thermogenesis, and in this state, it slows down metabolism and other key systems like hormone production to conserve power. So, this is something we want to look out for in our clients and our athletes. Sometimes they're working really hard, but maybe there's not the proper fueling, or maybe even there's a lack of education on the fuel. Signs and risk for relative energy deficiency syndrome are going to include disordered eating. We'll talk about that a little bit later, probably the third video of this chapter, or the second. Extreme weight loss methods, a very low resting heart rate, significant drop in body mass, changes in menstrual cycles, low iron levels, and poor bone mineral density. So this slide is kind of like a history slide. It's saying that the relative energy deficiency, or REDS or RED-S, hasn't always been something talked about, hasn't always been prioritized in recent literature because it used to be just focused on females. So the female athlete triad, basically, historically, scientists identified specific interplay between hormones, energy, and bones in females, and they called it a triad. So the triad basically described a dangerous domino effect. So an individual, a client, an athlete would have low energy availability, so they're tired, right? They're not consuming enough calories to meet the body's energy requirements. This could be with or without disordered eating, which we'll get into a little bit later. Then that can lead to menstrual dysfunction. So low energy availability, if there's not a lot of calories in the body, can lead to amenorrhea, which is loss of the menstrual cycle. So the body's going to shut down reproductive functions to save energy. And then that further can lead into low bone density, which is hormonal shifts leading to weakened bones, increasing the risk of osteopenia or osteoporosis. So that was a big part of this chapter in the past, and it still is. However, recently it's been promoted that energy deficiency rarely happens in a vacuum. It often follows predictable progression of behavioral changes, such as we went over: dieting, disordered eating, and then a clinical eating disorder. And the traditional model just had females, but why RED-S or REDS replace the female athlete triad is because it's more inclusive. It includes both sexes, acknowledging that male athletes also suffer metabolic and hormonal consequences from underfueling. So this is more holistic. It looks beyond just bones and periods to see how energy debt affects the entire body, an entire human. And it has a broader impact than just the female athlete triad. This kind of encompasses everybody that can deal with something like this. So relative energy deficiency, it covers the systems that the triad model missed. Moving on, we'll get through just a few slides of these, and then we'll stop this lecture. So nutrients, we're going to get into the main 6 nutrients. So there's macronutrients and micronutrients. Let's talk about the main. We're going to first start with protein. Protein is essential for building and repairing tissues, doesn't give us a lot of energy. Carbohydrates is our main source of energy. And then fat is concentrated energy source, vital for cell function, hormone production, and also vitamin absorption. So there's fat soluble vitamins. We need to have fat to be able to absorb those vitamins. Micronutrients are needed in smaller amounts, so they're still vital for our health. We just don't rely on them for building and repairing or sources of energies. So vitamins regulate body functions and support the immune system. Minerals are important for building bones, balancing fluids, nerve function. Minerals, just think of like rocks, you know? Water is an essential nutrient critical for every bodily function, including temperature regulation and nutrient transport. So we have the mains and then we have the micros. They're all main. It's super important. There are more nutrients, of course. Those are the main ones. Vitamins and minerals. What is the difference? Vitamins are organic substances needed in small amounts to perform metabolic functions. We did talk a little bit about fat soluble vitamins, but what are they? Fat soluble vitamins are vitamins that are carried by fat in the blood and stored in fat tissue in the body. So remember, fat is essential. We want to have a healthy amount of it. It's a good reminder for why. Fat soluble vitamins are going to be A, D, E, and K. Water soluble vitamins are C and B vitamins. And just a fun note is B12 can be stored in the liver for years, but all other unused water soluble vitamins will get excreted out in urine. So vitamins compete for absorption. We just want to make sure we're getting the right amount, and we don't want to waste any money or food overdoing a certain vitamin because it's just going to get excreted out once we have enough of it. Vitamin and mineral recommendations. So in the US and Canada, vitamin and mineral recommendations are called dietary reference intakes or DRIs. These focus on long-term health and they're broken into four categories. So we have basically RDA, recommended dietary allowance, the dietary intake level that meets the needs of almost 97 to 98 healthy people in a group. AI or adequate intake, a goal intake used when there isn't enough data to set an RDA. EAR, estimated average requirement. This is the intake level that meets the needs of half the people in a group. So not as good as that first one, right? And then UL is tolerable upper intake level. The maximum daily, oopsie, sorry about that. The maximum daily intake that is unlikely to cause health problems for almost all people. So this slide basically serves as a definition slide so that we're aware of what these acronyms stand for and we have a good understanding of what each one is. All right, we'll stop it here after this slide. Vitamins and minerals. So we just talked about vitamins, but what about minerals? They cannot be produced by the body. So think about nature, right? One thing that helped me just remember the difference between vitamins and minerals is minerals are earthly, right? We don't make those naturally. They contribute to the structure of our bone, teeth, nails, and they're a component of enzymes. They also perform a variety of metabolic functions. Some major minerals are iron, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Iron is necessary for red blood cell formation. Calcium helps us maintain healthy bones and teeth. Magnesium activates nearly 100 enzymes. Remember, enzymes are like they could be referred to as like the party starters. They get things going. Magnesium also helps nerves and muscles function, and then zinc is an essential part of more than 100 enzymes involved in digestions, reproduction, etc. So we'll stop here for today, and we'll continue on with macros.